Hi everybody, over the course of the last week we have talked about everything Mono Red Aggro, including a deck tech, analysis of the cards in the deck, why you play those cards, a sideboard guide against the top 10 most popular decks in Standard, flex slots and different builds of the deck, nuances and weird play patterns of the deck, and here is that, all those things combined into one big comprehensive deep dive video. Enjoy. So this is a stock Mono Red Aggro list in Standard. What this deck is attempting to do is play hyper aggressive creatures, get some mouse synergies that we'll talk about here in a second, pump their creatures up, and then after your opponent deals with the creatures, then be able to burn face and get the rest of the way there. There's a lot of like small weird nuances with this deck that I'm going to attempt to mention, but really this is an aggro deck. Like you're trying to defeat your opponent and as fast as possible. So let's start with the lands, playing a bunch of mountains, just so we can cast all of our spells, and for Rockface Village. Rockface Village is really sweet in a lot of ways. Basically you can only spend red mana to cast creature spells, or it produces a waste mana. You can pay red and tap it, tap target lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control, get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn, but you can activate this only as a sorcery. The reason this is good isn't necessarily to give +1/+0 and haste. Well, that's pretty nice on like Hired Claw or Heartfire Hero or Manifold Mouse or whatever, but is to trigger Valiant in Heartfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger. Valiant is like Heroic, except it counts for abilities as well, and you can only do it once per turn. So if you use Rockface Village to target Heartfire Hero or Emberheart Challenger, it triggers that Valiant ability, and being able to do that with a land without investing a spell like Monstrous Rage is really, really nice. We're playing 4 Burst Lightning, be able to get other small creatures and cheap creatures out of the way, but also a way to burn face to get that last bit of damage. We're playing 4 Heartfire Hero. It is a mouse soldier. The mouse part is really important. It's a 1-mana 1/1 with Valiant. When it becomes a target of spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So once it's been pumped up, it's pretty hard to block. Again, when you target things either with Monstrous Rage or Rockface Village or Manifold Mouse or anything like that, a Heartfire Hero gets that Valiant trigger and just grows over time, which is really, really sweet. We're playing Hired Claw. Hired Claw is something that kind of passed me by when it got printed, but it plays much better than it reads. It is a 1-mana 1/2 Lizard Mercenary, so again, you can target with Rockface Village, but it doesn't have Valiant. Whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. You can pay 2 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on Hired Claw, activate only if an opponent lost life this turn and only once each turn. So it's a way to dump mana, it's a way to deal damage, it's a solid 1-drop, it's effectively a 2-power 1-drop, it's just the damage is separated, and if you have extra mana, it can grow over time, which is really solid. We're playing 4 Monastery Swiftspear. It is a 1-mana 1/2 with haste and prowess. It is modern playable, so of course it's standard playable. It deals damage quick, deals damage effectively, and we have a lot of non-creature spells to be able to trigger that prowess. We're playing 4 Monstrous Rage, which might be the best card in the deck. Is a 1-mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Create a monster roll token attached to it. That monster roll token gives +1/+1 and trample. So the turn this is played, it effectively gives +3/+1 and trample, which is great, being able to protect any of these creatures, being able to like capitalize on the double strike from Manifold Mouse, being able to like trample over when people think that they're able to like block effectively. It's especially good on Screaming Nemesis. When people block with it, think they're going to kill it, and then they don't kill it, but also Screaming Nemesis triggers, which is disgusting. We'll talk about that in just a second. But also the monster roll token stays on the creature. It is a absolute disgusting card. Also triggers Valiant, which is pretty relevant as well. Speaking of Valiant, the other Valiant card in our deck, the Emberheart Challenger, is a 2-mana 2/2 with haste and prowess. Already really solid and really aggressive, but also is Valiant, where when it becomes a target of spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. So this is a way for us to get card advantage. We can use Monstrous Rage, we can use Rockface Village, we can use Manifold Mouse to target Emberheart Challenger and be able to dig through our deck while being super, super aggressive. Playing for Lightning Strike, same role as Burst Lightning, just 1 more mana, sometimes better, sometimes worse. Playing 4 Manifold Mouse, and this is where a lot of the nuances with the deck sort of come in. It's a 2-mana 1/2, but it has Offspring for an additional 2 mana, so you can pay 4 mana for this card to also have a 1/1 token that's a copy of Manifold Mouse, or you can pay 2 mana for it just to be a 1/2. And at the beginning of combat in your turn, target mouse you control gains your choice of Double Strike or Trample till end of turn. Almost always you're going to be selecting Double Strike. So this is already really good in an aggressive deck, especially on top of a Heartfire hero that's really big, or a prowessed up guy, Hired Claw, maybe something we Monstrous Rage, a Double Striker. Like, those are kind of obvious synergies. But also remember, this is an ability, so it triggers Valiant on Emberheart Challenger and Heartfire hero. Manifold Mouse can have you draw an additional card every single turn if you just target Emberheart Challenger with it. It can make Heartfire hero get bigger every single turn, and also have Double Strike, so it makes it even harder to block every single turn if they just sit there. So it makes your other mouse creatures a must answer, or Manifold Mouse to must answer, which if you pay 4 mana for it, it's really hard to must answer 2 cards. The card is absolutely excellent. A really common one too is Heartfire hero into Manifold Mouse, target Heartfire hero, trigger Valiant, swing for 4, which is crazy. It's crazy good. Screaming Nemesis is a 3 mana 3/3 with haste. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. That last little bit, it's a Boros Reckoner with haste and easier to cast. Besides the can't gain life for the rest of the game. That is disgusting, which means you can really aggressively attack with it, especially if your opponents have really big creatures, because if they have that demon that's 6/6 and you jam with it, they block, your thing dies, but also you're dealing 6 damage to not only your opponent, but any other target. It could be a creature, a planeswalker, or anything that is really, really scary. And if you deal it to the opponent, they can't gain life for the rest of the game, which is exactly what the Mono Red deck wants. Something very relevant is that, remember, you can target Screaming Nemesis with your own stuff. So if you want to Burst Lightning your opponent for damage, you might as well Burst Lightning the Screaming Nemesis and make the opponent never gain life, because the 2 damage still goes to the opponent. It'll just never ever gain life. Another really relevant play is Witchstalker Frenzy in your own Screaming Nemesis to deal 5 damage to your opponent, and turn Witchstalker Frenzy into a 1 mana deal 5, which is also really, really gross. Kills Screaming Nemesis, but often kills your opponent as well. Speaking of Witchstalker Frenzy, it is a 4 mana instant. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn. It deals 5 damage to target creature. So we're going to be attacking with a lot of creatures. We have a lot of creatures. This is a way to get big things out of the way. It is just a really solid card. Also, that combo of Screaming Nemesis is gross. As far as the sideboard goes, we're playing 2 Lithomantic Barrage. Really good against the Dimir deck and the different white decks, being able to deal 5 damage to a white or blue creature or planeswalker. We're playing 4 Torch the Tower, a really good answer to the white Enduring, but also just a solid answer to other aggressive decks. Playing 3 Twisted Fealty for those big, stupid demons. Playing 3 Urbrass Forge for decks that answer our aggression easier than other decks. And so you're able to play this on turn 3 and have it go really long, and it's really hard to answer. The 4th Witchstalker Frenzy for decks that have a lot of blockers that Witchstalker Frenzy can kill. And 2 Sunspine Links, a 4 mana 5/4. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented. And when Sunspine Links enters, it deals damage each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. Really good against decks that are looking to gain life. Really good against decks that don't play a lot of basics like Domain. I think I meant solely focus on the sideboard, but that's okay. So as far as sideboard goes, Lithomantic Barrage is good against these white and blue creatures and planeswalkers, obviously. Torch the Tower, very good against the aggressive decks, and the exile can sometimes really matter. Twisted Fealty, when your opponent is casting a bunch of very powerful big boy creatures. Urbrass Forge against decks with board wipes or a lot of removal, or looking to go really long with you. Witchstalker Frenzy, really good against decks that have 5 or less toughness blockers and they plan on blocking us. And then Sunspine Links is very good against decks that don't play a lot of basic lands, but also against decks that are looking to gain life. With that being said, the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, Lithomantic Barrage is awesome, especially since it can't be countered. Torch Tower is pretty good as well, being able to take out all of their creatures, and especially taking out Enduring Curiosity like forever. That being said, we don't want to overdo it with our removal, so I like taking out the Witchstalker Frenzy, and they have an insane amount of removal as well, and they're really not looking to block a lot of the time, so we're going to take out Summon of Monstrous Rage, and that's how I sideboard against Dimir. The second most popular deck in Standard is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, Witchstalker Frenzy is a little bit better, and Torch the Tower is, and Lithomantic Barrage obviously, are a little bit worse. I like Sunspine Links, because while they have pretty large amount of basics. They are looking to gain life, and that can kind of stop it. Stops the Crazy Gix command, you know, things like that. Or I guess it can stop the Crazy Gix command. It can just make you sacrifice it. And I like Urbrass Forge. It's kind of hard for them to deal with, especially if they're looking to gain life or just deal with our stuff. Monstrous Rage is coming out first and foremost. They have even more removal than Dimir. And I'm actually not a big fan of Screaming Nemesis because they have an insane amount of removal and they can just remove it. And that's kind of bad because if they're just removing it with non-damage, Screaming Nemesis kind of loses his point. So that's how I sideboard against Golgari midrange. The third most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and just to let you know, the Mono Red deck is also the 8th most popular deck, and we're going to sideboard the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red. And the Gruul Aggro deck, which is the 6th most popular deck, we're going to sideboard the same against essentially all 3 of them. So Gruul Prowess, Gruul Aggro, and Mono Red Prowess being the 3rd, the 6th, and the 8th most popular decks. The way we're going to sideboard against that is the 4 Torch the Tower, obviously. Need as much removal as possible. And the Witchstalker Frenzy. I'm going to cut probably the worst card in the deck, which is Monastery Swift Sphere, and then Shave on a Monstrous Rage, just so they very often have a lot of removal. And this is how I'm going to sideboard against the Red Aggro decks. The 4th most popular deck is the Esper Self Bounce deck. Against this deck, Lithamanic Barrage is pretty solid. Also a fan of Sunspine Links because they do gain a reasonable amount of life, especially post board. And I'm a fan of Torch the Tower, just removing things from being in the way. We have to take on the Monstrous Rage just because they have an insane amount of removal, even bounce removal. And similarly, Screaming Nemesis is not so good just because often we just have to recast it over and over and over and it just does nothing. So it's on the sideboard against the Esper Pixies or Esper Self Bounce deck. The 5th most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, we like Lithamanic Barrage. We like Witchstalker Frenzy. Again, we're just getting things out of the way. I'm a fan of Sunspine Links, so they are unable to gain life. And then we're just going to be cutting down on Lightning Strikes, because meh. And on Monastery Swift Sphere, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. Lightning Strike just isn't that good. The 6th most popular deck is Gruul Aggro. We've already talked about that. And the 7th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, Twisted Fealty is super good. Sunspine Links is super good as well. And Witchstalker Frenzy is also very, very good. We are sideboarding out of our Lightning Strikes because it doesn't actually kill anything. And similarly with Burst Lightning. And that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Zero Overlord's Domain deck. The 8th most popular deck is Mono Red, which is the mirror match. We've already talked about that. And so we're going to talk about the Mono White Token Control deck. Against this deck, Urbrass Forge is obviously great because they're looking to go super, super long with us. Like Lithamanic Barrage, so they can get rid of their Planeswalkers and, you know, all that stuff. Phasas, whatever. And then we're going to be taking out Lightning Strike. It doesn't really kill anything in our opponent's deck. We kind of have to keep the Monstrous Rage in, even though they have a ton of removal, because we need a way to get through the insects. So we're just going to shave like on a single Burst Lightning. That's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White tokens. And the 10th most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck, the Regal Bunnicorn whatever deck. Against this deck, we're going to side in Lithamanic Barrage. We're going to side in Torch the Tower. This spot removal is actually a little bit better against them. I like Sunspine Links because Shelter by Ghost is super, super, super scary. And then Witchstalker Frenzy. We're going to be taking out Monstrous Rage. I'm not a fan of Swift Spear, and we're going to shave on a Screaming Nemesis. That's why I sideboard against Azorius Convoke. These are the cards that pretty much are non-negotiable in the current builds of Mono Red Aggro. You will notice that there are only 3 non-flex slots in the main deck, which are all lands actually, and 6 non-flex slots in the sideboard. So frankly, the deck is pretty figured out, which is kind of exciting. And also I don't really know why I'm doing this video. It's mostly a sideboard video, but it's still important to talk about. So what do we play in those 3 slots in the main deck and those 9 slots in the sideboard? Well, these are our options. In the main deck, you can play any combination of 3 more mountains or 3 Soulstone Sanctuary. Now, the reason you would play the mountains is you just have better colors. Having too many colorless lands can be kind of scary, especially since Rockface Village is colorless for non-creatures. You will, if you play Soulstone Sanctuary, you will inevitably get some hands where you can't really cast your spells, which is really scary. But Soulstone Sanctuary, being a man land, is very, very good and can kind of finish out the game. So some are playing like 1 Soulstone Sanctuary, 2 mountains. Some are playing the opposite. Some are playing 3 Soulstone Sanctuary. Some are playing just the 3 mountains and 0 Soulstone Sanctuary. But that's the first decision you need to make, and that's your only decision in the main deck. As far as the sideboard goes, it gets a little more complicated. So you're going to be picking 9 of these 20 cards in the sideboard. You'd play Lithomanic Barrage. It's mostly for the Dimir decks. Also really decent against the new Azorius Convoke deck and whatnot. Tectonic Hazard being really good against the 2 Convoke decks as well. Torch the Tower, mostly for aggression, like dealing with that aggression. Obliterating Bolt, also decent against the aggressive decks, but mostly for the enduring cards and the blue enduring card, Enduring Curiosity, in like the Dimir deck and the Azorius deck. Case of the Crimson Pulse is a case that when it enters, you discard a card, then draw 2 cards. And if you have no cards on hand, it's solved. And at the end of your upkeep, you discard a hand and draw 2 cards. This is really good against decks that are really good at answering what we're attempting to do, and you expect the game to go very long. And so it's an opportunity to totally outcard your opponent. Twisted Fealties, gain control of target creature until end of turn, and tap that creature, gains haste until end of turn, and then put a Wicked Roll token attached up to 1 target creature. This card's really good against decks that play a bunch of big creatures, something in like Domain and stuff like that. Urbrass Forge fulfills a similar role as Case of the Crimson Pulse. It's for decks that you expect to go very, very long against and are very good at answering our initial plan, because the longer the game goes with Urbrass Forge on the battlefield, the more threatening it is and creates inevitability that's really hard for your opponent to deal with. Sunspine Links, 4 mana, 5/4 elemental cat. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented, and when Sunspine Links enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. So this is very good against decks that are greedy with their mana base, so 3+ color decks, but also really good against decks whose plan is to gain life. And then Ghost Vacuum is decent graveyard hate and is also very good against the blue enduring card, because it touches the graveyard before it comes back, and so you can actually kill the blue enduring card and be able to get rid of it forever. So it's 1 mana, tap it to exile target card from a graveyard, and 6 mana to put each creature card exile with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control, with a flying counter on it, and each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. The issue with Ghost Vacuum is it doesn't really work towards our initial plan of like getting blockers out of the way or just dealing more damage. So you'd really only want to play this card if you really, really think you need graveyard hate. But you're going to be selecting 9 of these 20 cards and 3 of these 6 cards to add to your non-flex slots main deck. And then you have, and then you have created your very own but stock Mono Red Aggro list. So Valiant triggers when you target a creature with Valiant for the first time each turn. There are 2 Valiant cards we play in this deck. It's Heartfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger. Both of them do very powerful things. We talk about it in the deck tech. But understand that abilities trigger Valiant as well. That includes Manifold Mouse triggering every single turn. The Manifold Mouse giving double strike triggers Valiant on both Emberheart Challenger and Heartfire Hero. And activating Rockface Village as a land will trigger Valiant on Emberheart Challenger and Heartfire Hero. You don't need a spell to trigger Valiant. You can do it with abilities, and not devoting a card to it makes it even more powerful. Also remember, Screaming Nemesis will deal damage to the opponent even with your own spells. So if you're going to Burst Lightning for damage for your opponent and you have a Screaming Nemesis, you might as well Burst Lightning the Screaming Nemesis and then redirect the damage to your opponent, because then they won't gain life for the rest of the game. And then also, if you're playing Witchstalker Frenzy, which if you're playing Mono Red, you are playing Witchstalker Frenzy, even though Witchstalker Frenzy can't target the opponent, you can target your own Screaming Nemesis, which will kill the Screaming Nemesis, but you can redirect that 5 damage to the opponent. And 5 damage to the face for sometimes 1 mana is insane. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.